But we're going to start with Mary Campos from Campos Appraisals Incorporated, and she is the current Seattle chapter president for the Appraisal Institute. And it's always fun to talk to appraisers, kind of get an idea on how they're putting up value. It's such an important process in the home buying. You know, everything has to go right for the loan, and then they've got to come in at value so the bank can loan the money over. So I'm really excited, and she just called in, so we'll patch her through right now. Hey, Mary, are you there?
Yeah, this is me.
How's it going?
It's going great.
Oh, I really appreciate you taking some time to call in. How's the weekend so far?
It's going wonderful.
Can you give us a little bit of a background on how you became an appraiser?
Sure. I've been appraising about 25 years, and I probably would say about a quarter of the appraisers I know got involved because they had a family member involved. And my father was an appraiser. My husband's an appraiser. As it turns out, my daughter's an appraiser. So,
wow.
Part of the reason I think that happens is because appraisers need to undergo at least a 2-year training process. And so, very often it's a family member who's willing to do that for you. So
Now, things have kind of changed a lot with your appraisals and everything in the continuing education. And how have you seen things change from, 25 years ago when you first got started?
Well, when I got started, there wasn't even licensing. So, licensing has come about. Certainly a lot of interactions with the state now as to what's required of appraisers, what kind of education they need, and that seems to continually change. There are some, major changes that are happening at the beginning of next year. So as time goes on, they keep changing, and that's not bad. Those are good things, requiring us to have better education. So it's good for us, and it's good for the public trust as well.
And then, Mary, you're the current president for the Appraisal Institute right now for
the
Seattle
chapter, yes.
Could you give us a little background information on the Seattle chapter?
The Seattle chapter is, we have, besides our main Seattle chapter, we have a north and south branch, and so that encompasses most of western Washington. And we have roughly about 500 members. It's a pretty good group, and it encompasses both residential and commercial appraisers. A lot of appraisers in that group are not only fee appraisers, but we've got bank reviewers and all kinds of people within that group. But these are all appraisers who belong to the Appraisal Institute, and so strive for the highest of ethics and good professionalism and upkeeping their education. And so that's what the Appraisal Institute is all about.
Okay, let's dive into an appraisal.
Sure.
What are appraisers looking for when they're determining the value? I know there's so many variables there.
Well, I guess I would first say, we're looking for whatever the market's looking for. So I was somewhere not long ago when someone made a comment, well, it's up to the appraisers to decide what the value is. And, my thought back to that is, no, we're actually just reporting what the market's doing. And so, while it sometimes feels like, maybe we have a lot of say in what a market value, and there's no question that appraisals are opinions of value, right? It's not an absolute, it's not a science. But we're coming up with an opinion of value based on the data. And so, technically we should be looking for whatever the market's looking for when it comes to value. But I would say, if you're talking about when you go out to do an inspection, say, of a single-family house, what kinds of things are you looking for? Is that more the question you're looking for?
Yeah, just kind of the lines of what are the things you guys are looking for to increase the value and those items for house to house.
Well, I think you probably have the best handle on it being an agent, but I would say we're trying to replicate what the market's doing. So, generally the market likes to see a really clean house, a house that's been well maintained. I know even when people are getting an appraisal done, say for a refinance reason or for any reason, say estate purposes or all there are different kinds of reasons besides purchasing a home. And I think often people don't put the time into preparing that house for an inspection like they would if they were getting ready to sell it. When you get ready to sell it, usually, you do everything possible, right? You really clean it up, you spruce it up, and you put the best touches on it. And I would say that would go a long way as well when you're doing a refinance or anything else, because we're not home inspectors, right? So we're not. We're looking at the kind of what you see when you walk through the house for the most part. And if we see maintenance things that aren't taken care of, then sort of the assumption is, well, gee, maybe there's some underlying maintenance things that aren't taken care of.
Okay.
If it looks to me like a homeowner is really taking care of the house in every respect that I can see, then I'm assuming that all of the structural things are being taken care of as well. And, that's kind of a leap of faith, but that's sort of an idea. And then the other thing, too, is I think, a lot of buyers, and I would, get your backup on this, but a lot of buyers don't have the vision. They can't see past other people's junk or other people's dirt.
Right.
And so, getting something cleaned up, I would say, one of the troubling things sometimes as an appraiser is, say, walking into a basement or into a garage, and you literally can't, either you can't get your tape measure, or nowadays we use lasers, for the most part for measuring tools. But, if you can't see the other wall, it's a little troubling sometimes, and I know we all collect a bunch of stuff. So, we're just like everybody else that we're looking at houses for. But, being able to access the house well, being able to see how it's been maintained. We're obviously the market likes updates, right? Kitchens and baths, that's what the market kind of likes that. And so, we report that stuff. We're obviously looking for something that's maybe functionally different or out of line with what the market wants right now. So we're trying to really pair up with what the market's doing. When we look at a house and we look up comparables, we're trying to get comparables that are as similar to that house as possible, because we're trying to replicate what does the market think about that.
And we've got a lot of bedroom communities in South King County and North Pierce County. When there's 100 homes in a neighborhood and one person's putting in air conditioning, are you looking at those upgrades, or is it more, are you looking at the maintenance of the home, or is it kind of a combination of the two?
Well, we try to remember to say a lot that cost, does not equal value.
Right.
And so if you're the one person in the neighborhood who's put in air conditioning and nobody else in the neighborhood's put it in, there's a good chance you're not going to get dollar for dollar. I mean, someone might pay you a little extra for it. It's a nice item. But if the rest of the market doesn't think it's necessary, they're probably not going to pay for it. And that's the thing that we see with what we call super adequacy ideas. We see it particularly in people who do, say, they do a lot of custom things, right? It's something that they really like, but, does the rest of the market like it? We see a lot of this in very high-end properties where, someone goes in and they build their dream home, and the house may not be, but 10 or 15 years old, and the next buyer comes along, and that's not their dream home, and if they can afford to redo it, they will, which means they don't place too much value on some of those unique items that someone else might have put in. And so, I remember just, so many years ago, probably in a class, somewhere saying, it's best to be the lowest value in the neighborhood than being the highest neighborhood, because you're going to be pulled up a little bit if you're the lower guy. You're going to be drawn down a little bit if you're the top guy that nobody else is, has what you have. So I always tell people, if you're remodeling, you're doing whatever, do what you love to do if you plan to stay there for a long time.
That's great advice, Mary.
Just remember that if you're going to market it, or if you need it appraised, cost does not always equal value.
And listeners just joining us, I've got Mary Campos from Campos Appraisal Inc., and she's given us an idea of what appraisers are looking for out there. And I really love that last point. If you're not going to stay there for a while, don't spend the extra money of putting all the granite in and redoing the kitchen unless you can really enjoy it. So we're talking a little bit about bedroom communities, and the turnovers, like you have a home that's 10 years old and maybe it's time to paint and stuff like that. I mean, are you seeing just the normal maintenance that's not increasing the value or whatnot, but how about upgraded roofs and stuff like that? Is that any of that stuff helping at all?
Well, certainly if a house needs a roof, you have to do it, and we consider that part of ongoing maintenance. We don't really consider that an upgrade, right? Now, if you're putting on a 50-year roof in a neighborhood that has 20-year roofs, I guess that's an upgrade, right? Or, but there are certain things we have to do to maintain a house. When the furnace quits, you have to replace it. Yeah. So we don't call that an upgrade if it's got a new furnace and it needed a new furnace. If you went from, say, baseboard to forced air, then we'd call that an upgrade, right? Yeah. So again, we're trying to come back with what does the market say about this, and I'd like to reiterate the point that appraisers we try very hard. We're just people, of course. We're trying very hard to take our own personal biases out. It's hard to do sometimes, but we're trying to say, what does the market say about this? And so if we're looking at something, we try to get some support for that. What does the market want to pay back for this?
Because you're really just going off of historical data, what's sold, right?
Well, we are, but certainly in a changing market, and I would say the past, umpteen years, we've had a changing market constantly. I always look at actives and pendings. I want to know what the market is doing right now. And so it's true, we have to use solds, but we very often rely on actives and pendings. Now, there's certain lenders that have guidelines about that, but even a lot of lenders want to see an active and a pending in there because they want to see what's happening right now. We don't want to miss what's happening.
Mary, we've got some parts in, well, I guess they're all over, but, the Seattle and Bellevue sellers aren't seeing as much. But once you get to the outskirts, we still got some distressed inventory.
Sure.
And a lot of people wonder about that. How is that affecting them? Can you speak to that a little bit? If neighbors' homes are getting short sold and foreclosed, are those true comparables? Are they being adjusted? Or
Well, I personally think that we have to look at everything, right? So if your house is on the market and there's a short sale across the street, you have to analyze it. Short sales are the hardest, I think, because they often sit for very long times, and there's a long, lengthy contract time between you get someone to agree to the price, and so those are harder. But a bank REO, I would say very often, the difference in a sales price sometimes is really just condition. They're vacant. Very often they haven't been kept up. But, we have to analyze it. And, I personally am a really big, I'm in favor of verifying my sale. So I like to call the listing or the selling agent on all of my comparables. And if I've got one particularly that's an REO or short sale, and I say, do you think this market reflected market value? If it's been on the market for a long time and maybe they've dropped the value and maybe it really did sell for market value,
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to the analysis. You can't just assume that it's not market value, but you can't assume that it is either. So you got to call some people, you got to talk to them, you got to figure out what's going on so you can report that accurately.
And then how far generally do you go out for an appraisal for comparables?
Oh, for comparables. Well, ideally, in an ideal world, I would say Fannie Mae would really like to see 3 comparables within a mile.
Yeah.
But we all know that that's not always possible. So,
Right.
So initially we try to stay as close as we can. But if there just aren't any sales there, then we have to expand. And sometimes we have to go to particularly if, depending how unique it is, right? If it's say you got a log home, you really going to have to put a log home as a comparable in there somewhere. And you may even have to go to a completely different neighborhood.
Yeah.
The main key is make sure you analyze what a location adjustment might need to be factored in as well. But obviously we try to stay in close if the comparables are there.
Mary, I love this next question, and I could talk to you all day long. This is just so interesting to me. I really appreciate you being part of this. How do you determine the value for a mountain view or a water view? That's got to be a little bit of a challenge, right, to put a dollar amount to some of that?
Well, it is. It is. And again, I would say, we try to find comparables that have something similar. They're very often not going to be that similar.
Right.
But, when I'm considering a view, I would say one of the things I'm looking for is, what's the view of? Is it, how distant is the view? Is it unobstructed? Is it just a winter view? Is it, is it a 30-degree view or is it really 180? And I have to say, I have to laugh a lot. A lot of the listings I see that say panoramic or 180 view. And you got to remember that if you put your arms outstretched to each side, nothing in front of you, that would be a panoramic 180-degree view.
Yeah.
And I would say few properties have that unless you're on a bluff.
Yeah.
But, obviously the distance of the view and what you're seeing. So even say water views. Obviously water views are generally, higher than mountain views, and mountain views, better than city views. And kind of depending on, again, I don't want to be too, it depends. That's a big word, it depends. But water views, it depends on what you're seeing. So if you're on, say, the Puget Sound, do you see a ferry route? Do you see something active in your view? If you're on a lake, is it a lake that allows motorboats? Are you seeing something that's going to be interesting when you get up in the morning and drink your coffee? Or is it problematic that there's motor boats and you want to be on a lake that's more quiet? So,
Right.
Again, we're trying to go back to the market. We're trying desperately to find comps that have similar situations. I'm personally, when I do a cost approach on an appraisal, I actually drive by my land sales because I want to see, if they have the same kind of view that I have. And views are hard because, very often the view is very different from someone's living room than it is from the street where I'm taking a picture of their property. And so, sometimes I'll drive back several streets back and see if I can get that same view. But views are tricky. But, we try hard to see if we can comp them out as best as possible.
Especially with all the good photography, it's tough to tell if that's really an everyday view or if
Absolutely.
it's close by or far out there, huh?
Yeah, no question. But there's a lot of we're very fortunate in today's technology. We have a lot of pictures to view. A lot of times we're doing something that if it's been in the multiple, there are some interior photos, and there's some. Again, you have to be careful where those views or pictures are taken from. But that helps us a lot in determining what is truly comparable.
So, Mary, just time for one more question. I just want to get your feedback because you're so involved with the research and the pulse of the market. How do you see the market behaving right now and expectations for the rest of the year? Any insight on that?
Well, I certainly don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
I really am I spend a lot of time when I do my market trends for each appraisal. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we have to be careful is not being too vague. And so, just this morning, sort of anticipation of this question that you might ask, mm-hmm. I looked up, if you just generally look up, say, all of what King County is doing or all of what Pierce County is doing, if you just look up all of those and, kind of look at those on a chart, it kind of looks like things are trending upward, right? Mm-hmm. But if you go in and pull out specific markets and get specific to, and that's what you need to do with each appraisal, you really need to try to get as specific as you can to that property type, because every property type moves differently. And so, if it's a real typical, it's going to fit right in there. But I went and pulled some real typical, pulled it down to say a house between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet that's not on waterfront. That's I'm trying to bracket it. If you get too little of data, of course, it's not really reliable, and that's the reason sometimes we rely on big pieces of data. But they can be misleading sometimes, and so we have to narrow it down. The market seems relative. I mean, obviously, this is a good time in the market, right? Summer is a great time in the market, and we saw that the market was great last year. It increased, and then most places we saw it really took a little bit of a dive during, say, November to February of this year, and then things have picked up again. So some things are seasonal, but it looks to me that the economy is thinking fairly positive. And I see it at least stable, if not trending upward a tad bit more.
Mary, I appreciate that. Just great insight. And I really am glad that we were able to have you call in and get to learn a lot from you today. I really appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, I appreciated the chance to do so.
We'll definitely have to have you back on again, Mary. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Mary.